Hello, everybody. It's great to be here one more time today. My name is Gary Fowler. I'm the CEO, president, founder of GSD Get You Done Venture Studios, premier AI and quantum venture studio located in the heart of Silicon Valley. I'm a 17-time serial entrepreneur with several unicorns under the belt. I was on the original management team of Click Software, which was sold to Salesforce for $1.35 billion, and also Eva.ai, and it's your tech company I co-founded with Dr. David Yang. So I'd like to welcome each of you to GSD Presents Silicon Valley AI and Tech, where I bring the innovators, the builders, and the visionaries shaping the future of our world. As I said, I'm your host, Gary Fowler, CEO and founder of GSD Venture Studios and Family Office. And today we're diving into something most people don't even realize exists, yet it controls trillions of dollars globally. We're talking about the invisible empire, the hidden world of family offices, and more important, the massive information crisis quietly undermining them. Joining me today, by the way, that crisis I call it infobesity, and I see it every day. Joining me today is Ken Ducey, CEO of Veridel. Ken's journey is everything and anything but typical. From Wall Street to Main Street, from testifying before Congress to building AI-powered platforms that solve real-world problems at scale. Now he's taking on one of the most complex and opaque ecosystems in finance, helping family offices harness AI to organize intelligence, uncover what truly matters, and preserve wealth and legacy for generations. So with that, I'd like to bring Ken on board. Hi, Ken.
Hey, good afternoon, Gary. Thank you so much for having me on.
So, Ken, your journey is fascinating. Wall Street to Congress, to media, to entrepreneurship. What was the turning point that you said, I want to solve real problems that actually matter?
It probably was from Wall Street. I mean, Wall Street definitely has a use, and I certainly am not putting it down. Without it, we would never have been able to survive without a nation and capitalism, obviously. However, when you're there and like me and a very sort of hands-on business operator, it's very difficult in a way because you are far removed from at least certainly as a trader, which I was, you're very far removed from actual business. And so it's not like you get to actually work with the companies, instruct the companies, or certainly understand things like how to, solve the problems with a customer or something like that. It's much more about trading the stock, obviously, and their cap table and things of that nature. So it's certainly not as sort of exciting as actually steering the ship. And so when I was down there, I kind of realized that this wasn't the best place for me to really apply certainly what I know and what I understand in terms of business and where I wanted to sort of go with the career. And so that's when I left it. And from there, going to a big company, I felt like that might have been sort of out of the pot and into the fire with the ability to really get hands-on with things. And so I joined a VC company instead, thinking I could really get involved. Obviously, with young companies, it's a lot easier to steer the ship and really have an impact of what direction they're going in.
Now, you talk about moving from proximity to capital to proximity to impact. What does that really mean in practice?
When you have an idea and you're at, I don't want to put that in any company, when you're at multibilliondollarcompany.com and you have an idea, it's very difficult to actually get that idea done, unless obviously you've been at that company for 20 years and you really have the ear of the CEO or whoever it is. Certainly as someone who's only, just getting started with the company, you really do have to go through a lot in order to actually do something that has impact on a company of that size. And so when you talk about the proximity to impact, it's not just really proximity as much, like I guess it is in terms of being able to have that ability to be right next to that decision maker, or have that ability, whether it's the decision makers, the board, or whether it's a CEO, or whether it's a customer, just being able to have that ability to be able to, again, like steer that ship and pivot and maybe do something a little differently than what was done in the past. And that's more, just more, I find more meaning in that. I find more fun in that. I found certainly more fulfillment in that, as opposed to, constantly sort of running ideas up and getting frustrated that this, that, or other thing is not being done the way that you believe it should be done.
We're a family office ourselves in a venture studio, but most people don't understand exactly what a family office is and why should people care. How important are family offices in this whole scenario?
Yeah, so two things. Getting started with the first question is like, what is a family office? And if you ask 10 people, you're going to get 10 different answers for this. But essentially what happens is families become successful. They just tend to accumulate a lot of complex assets and entities And those entities get spread across advisors, spreadsheets, emails, to where they're really not even sure anymore exactly what they own or what's coming due. And that obviously could lead to a number of issues. And so that's when a family or anybody would sort of get together and say, I need to put structure around this. This is no longer like my personal wealth or whatever it is. Like, this needs structure in order for me to really manage this. And that's really where the family office comes in. It's when those complex entities need a structure around them, need people around them to manage them. And whether that means from an investment perspective of making sure that your assets and your investments are sort of in the right place and toward the mission that you want it to be, or a tax perspective to make sure you're obviously optimizing, maximizing it from a tax advantage, and also even from a personal perspective, so that if you've got assets and houses and boats and cars, that things such as, are they adequately insured? Do you have clear title as it gets passed down? All that needs to be organized, and that's when you really need to form that family office around it. And why it's important is, family office has been around forever, right? Like, at least hundreds of years. And the issue now, though, much more so, especially in like the last 20 years, is the amount of sort of wealth that's being transferred. So it's $140 trillion that will be transferred over the next 20 years to the next generation. That's an enormous amount of money. And when you talk about that and you talk about the impact that that's going to have, a couple things you have to think about. One is, when you talk to anybody on Wall Street, it's been a cover story in many articles and newspapers. Family offices are like the new power players on Wall Street in terms of their ability to invest quickly, their ability to have what's called patient capital, so that they don't just sort of want to go into invest in something and just obviously want to see a return in 3 to 5 years. They're much more apt to invest in something if it has a 10, 20-year return. And obviously the amount of it, like the amount that they're deploying, is incredible, frankly. And so it really does have a lot of impact on just regular investments and Wall Street sort of capitalization in general. But also, when you talk about that amount of wealth, and when you talk about the fact that it's not owned by a private equity fund, let's say, or somebody really looking for, and only being judged on one thing, and that's the rate of return for those investments, family offices have much more of an impact type of investing. What I mean by that is, what they're really interested in, most of them, obviously they want a return, but a lot of them are also interested in their legacy. And what they would love to do is see this wealth that they've created actually do some good, and not just good, today or tomorrow or the next day, but literally for like 100 years. The most famous one, or probably the one with the most impact today, is probably the Walton family. If you look at what they've done and how they structured that family office and the impact they've had in the world, not just, again, they have had great returns, but outside of that, in terms of the impact they've had on various charities and things that they've been able to create, it's incredible. And I'm sure, Sam Walton is right now sitting somewhere looking down and going, God bless, it wasn't just about me and my wealth. Like, look at what that wealth has done way after I was no longer on this planet. And so a lot of family offices have the exact same thing, where they really do want their grandchildren not just to, be able to share the wealth, which I'm sure they do. However, they also want them to make sure and understand the impact that this wealth can have. And they want to see that happen for generation after generation. So when you talk about the impact, first, again, you have all this wealth. And secondly, it's directed many times towards some sort of mission or passion. It really does have a substantial impact on the world that we, live in today and will be living in for 100 years.
So what kind of problems, you talk about information crisis, what actually is broken inside the family offices today?
So unfortunately, historically, that money does not survive. And what typically happens is it gets passed on to the next generation. The next generation wasn't necessarily, there's a whole bunch of different things where the next generation certainly wasn't prepared to just have the wealth. The other one, and I think happens even more, is the next generation just doesn't understand what it is that the founder actually wanted to do with that wealth. And not that anybody has a malicious motivation or anything like that, but let's face it, there are a lot of charities and a lot of good that money can do. Unless the founder really organizes their information and puts it in a place that can be passed on, and not just that, but also sort of put guardrails around it and said, this is where I want my legacy to be. So I'm not saying that it's not important to do X, Y, and Z in whatever country. However, this is what I want my money to be done with, and I want you to focus on this so we can actually have an impact and not just sort of spread this out, so thin, frankly, that it doesn't have an impact. And and therefore sort of just disappears. And that's where, the real problem becomes, is that, again, going back to, the complexity of a lot of these assets and the fact that they're all over the place in different things. You really do have to have a system or some place that all these are together, monitored and kept up to date in order to make sure that it's meeting whatever mission you have, whatever the mission of the organization, whatever legacy you want to leave behind. You have to be organized in order for it to do that, just like any other business, frankly.
So what kind of risk does poor information management create? Financial, operational, generational, even generational?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, less impactful is like the just day-to-day risks. The amount of fines, there's fines obviously that are paid when things are missed and bills are missed and capital calls are missed and things of that nature. But there's also significant opportunity cost. I can't tell you the amount of times that someone I know has come up and said, look, I've got this opportunity, X dollars I need, but I really do need it in like a week. And the person they're asking certainly, let's say, has that wealth, but they're not sure what's liquid. And they don't know, even if it's in the bank, is that already committed to this, that, or the other thing. And so that's an opportunity that they're not going to be able to react to within 6 days. They're going to have to research it. They're going to have to figure out like exactly what I have, what's coming due, et cetera. And then by that time, typically, that opportunity might go away. So there's the opportunity risk as well. And so the one is the, obviously the fines and sort of day to day. Then there's the opportunity risk. But probably the most significant one is the legacy risk. And again, if, as you accumulate wealth, and I'm sure you're thinking about this as well, you'd love to see good come out of that. And you'd love to see your assets and the hard work that you put in do something much more than just, provide whatever it is for the next generations, but really provide something outside of that in terms of making the world a better place. And that is really hard to do if you're not prepared to pass that down.
Well, I mean, one of the things that I've done is we created our venture studio. We have 185 companies in it, companies from pre-seed to Series C, and we work with those companies and we figure, the problem is it's like throwing darts at a dartboard with a blindfold on, investing in a lot of senses. Think about it. The average VC is between 25 and 34. They never built a company. The degrees are in finance. They're trying to tell you what to do, and they've never been operators like I have. And so you go down through and look at it and you say, that model's flawed. It's crazy. It's like a shotgun approach, shoot them blindly. So why not find those companies, work with them, use the tools that you have to be able to locate them, work with them. You can dramatically increase the probability of success, dramatically. Well, because it's what? Networking, contacts, operational expertise, or access to capital. Those three in a resilient team, any company can become a unicorn. It's like being in Bohemian Grove, right? You're in there, you have the contacts and the help. And so, but we don't think about it like that. And it's not just a U.S. problem, right? I just came back from Africa and Nigeria. It's a problem we have everywhere. It's the same kind of problem, but the challenges that are lower level are a lot different, right? Because people don't get it. And so, and at the same time, I have the family offices call me and they say, hey, I want to invest in an XYZ top tier AI company. I want to put 125 million in. I'm not a investor in terms of I don't have a license, et cetera. I just happen to have a lot of friends, hey, why don't you check this out? And it's changing. The amount of wealth created, I'm sure you agree, Kenneth, this is unprecedented how much wealth is being created right now. It's at a different, my friend Elon Musk could be a trillionaire in the near term. And it changes everything. Well, how much money does the 1% have? Well, the 1% has probably 99.4% of the wealth. It's crazy now. It's not like it used to be.
Right. And like I said, that wealth is also going to get transferred over the next 20 years to the next generation that's not prepared for it. Most of them are not prepared for it, let's say. So 100.
Right. Rockefeller didn't I think it's only the generation today. There's 176 family members in the Rockefeller family. And it's just today that they started to be able to get a hold of the money because he didn't trust them and he was afraid to be squandered because they don't know how to deal with money. If you're the first generation, you're not used to it. You're used to being spoiled, but you don't know how to, make the decisions that your dad did.
100%. And then, like I said, it's even, if everybody gets it and sort of starts doing their own thing with it, it doesn't have the same impact as if you all combine the forces together and really thought about, this is one thing that we really want to be as our legacy, whether it's education, whatever it might be, and really do something special in that direction, as opposed to 100 like sort of little things out there, which again tends to just be inefficient. And that's why, it doesn't do as good overall. But yeah, I mean, going back to your point, though, I mean, it's $140 trillion that is going to be transferred to the next generation over the next 20 years. I mean, we all hear these numbers sometimes and they go in one ear and out the other. But if you really think about $140 trillion, that is a powerful amount of money. I mean, that's not like
140 trillion, 1% of the population. That's a crazy thing about it. I mean, it's unhinged on that side. Let's talk about Veridel. What exactly are you building and how does it solve the invisible platform?
Yeah, so we created a platform. It was based on the needs of a family office. And essentially what, I look at, number one is the one thing that has always been my motto is that the worst thing you can do is have a solution and go looking for a problem. And I find a lot of AI like that in different ways because everybody can sort of see what it can do by using ChatGPT and whatnot. And so then they start creating these things and automating these things that necessarily should have never been automated to begin with. However, when it comes to family offices and you look at the problems that I described, there's really two things. Number one, the amount of inputting information is insane in terms of, and you probably like this, but you get invoices, statements, capital calls every day, right? Of all this stuff coming through your inbox. And then on the other side, it's a matter of querying it. And it's a matter of saying, okay, I know I got all this stuff, like, what is my exposure if the Florida real estate goes down, or what's my exposure to crypto or whatever it might be, or am I adequately insured? And so those types of queries are really hard to answer. But again, AI makes that easy. So AI makes the input easy. As you very well know, you can literally feed documents. It's going to not only it'll figure out what the document is, whether it is a statement or a capital call invoice or whatever else, but it'll also take the information and make sure it goes into the right place. Then instantaneously, one example, for example, is like if it's an invoice, it'll even go, okay, I know this is an invoice from the marina. Okay, let me compare it to the last 11 invoices. And literally, it automatically tell you, oh, this is 20% more, 10% more, whatever else it is. If it's a capital call, it'll look at it and say, is this routing number on the bottom? Is that the correct routing number? Let me compare it to the previous routing numbers. Let me, go on the web and make sure that this is the routing number for, whatever the name of that fund is. So that's one thing when it comes to inputting, that really helps out a lot, obviously, to keep the data up to date and make sure it's sort of on a real-time basis you're protecting. But then on the other side, once the information's in there, again, AI is great at being able to actually query the information. So we have that platform that essentially gives you that command center so that it's very, very simple for you to get the information in and very simple for you to access and actually query that information.
How much do the families understand what's happening with AI?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's very interesting because on one side, I do find them very aware when it comes to an investment perspective. So in other words, if you ask them about Anthropic or OpenAI or whatever it might be, even companies like ServiceNow, they're very well aware how they're using AI, how AI might affect them, etc. Whatever report you can say, they'll quote it. When it comes to how they use it personally, like efficiently, that's where they don't understand. Like they don't understand how these agents can really help them on a daily basis. And again, exactly what I described, being able to sort of take that information. So it's like I said, it depends on how you ask the question, because on one side, they're very aware of it on sort of a macro level, on an investment level, but certainly on a family office or predictive, on a efficiency level, they aren't really aware of exactly how to use it. And again, they use it certainly to type emails and do reports and whatever else it is, but they don't understand its capability when it comes to agents that can actually look at things and remind them things are due, or remind them when there might be a cash flow problem coming up or something like that, which, again, AI is really good at doing that.
So, how has AI fundamentally changed the way the family offices operate, not just incrementally, but structurally?
Well, that's what I don't think it's changed it yet. And that's where Veridel's trying to make that happen, because it can, right? Like there is a huge benefit. However, most have not adopted it yet. And therefore, they are still sort of working with spreadsheets and emails. And frankly, there's individuals that I have found at each family office that's sort of like that go-to person when someone wants some piece of information. They, call them up whatever hour a day it might be and say, hey, could you tell me about whatever it might be? And that person has to go scrambling into spreadsheets and emails and whatnot to try to find the answer. And so, that's again where they haven't really adopted AI, and they should. I mean, the benefit of something like that, and it's not just financial, that person that's searching those spreadsheets and looking at those documents, they were never hired to do that, right? They were hired to help you in terms of your mission and making sure that that mission was correct. They were hired to, let's say, look at your investments and make sure they're on in line with what it is you want to be investing in. They want to make sure you're being tax efficient, et cetera. But they're not, because they're spending all their time on spreadsheets, looking for stuff. And so it really is a very inefficient use.
Can you give me a real world example of how your platform surfaces insights that would otherwise be missed?
Sure. I mean, one of the best ones is insurance. As you know, like if you have a number of assets and you have a number of different things, it's like, until unfortunately, like a hurricane is about to hit Palm Beach or something, you don't even really think about it. Something like AI and a tool that we have will actually go out and look at your assets. Again, it can be set up agentically to do it automatically once a quarter, but it'll look at your insurance policies, look at your assets, and it'll say like, hey, guess what? You X yacht with X feet, that you should have more insurance on it, or because it's in Palm Beach, you should be doing this with it, and things like that. The other one, the big one, is also financial, in terms of just being able to give you a cash flow statement and things of that nature. And so, yeah, I don't know if that answers the question.
If you were, Ken, advising a family office today, what would be the first thing you would fix immediately?
Documents. So, going back to your example, I know of at least 2 or 3 situations where they went to do something, and it's not like a $10,000 thing. It was like to go to sell a house that's worth millions. They couldn't sell it because they couldn't close on the sale because they didn't have clear title. And by clear title, I mean, when it was purchased 80 years ago or whatever it might have been, it was probably purchased by an individual, but then it was put into, the title was put into an LLC, and then that LLC was put into another LLC, and then it was taken out of LLC and put it, whatever it might be. And things like that, believe it or not, are incredibly common. And then all of a sudden they go to do something with that asset. They can't, because legally when they do the title search, they can't cross it over. I know that.
Yeah, they can't trust it's crazy.
Yeah. And so, think about buying a house. They're like, I think this is, the right time. No, I'm not, I'm not going to sit there and take that risk. So, it's, and I know the same thing has happened as well with even transferring money. Like I know one situation where, it was a wealth manager, and she convinced the family to move their money over to her, and they couldn't do it because there was, again, the chain and the trust, the way it was set up, it was, nobody really can understand exactly how, and that money could be transferred over. And obviously they have the money, like it's not like they can't use it. They're living in the house, they know they own it, but that doesn't really matter if you don't have the documentation and you don't have a clear title. Legally, it's almost like you don't own it. So,
you talk about preserving legacy for centuries. How does AI actually enable that?
Well, so one of the things that we talk a lot about is, and it's sort of outside of the AI conversation, and certainly where ours, but it's like a family constitution. So what you really need to do is sit down and say, look, this is how we're going to make decisions. This is the purpose of the money. This is what's going forward. Where AI comes in is, if you can structure that document correctly, and you can get it in there, you can literally, again, agentically, once a month say, here's all our investments. Are we keeping true to that document? Like, are we keeping true to our financial plan? Are we keeping true to our, mission and what we want our legacy to be? So if someone's going out there, and whether it's an investment or whether it's a charitable contribution, but it's not part of that mission, it'll point it out and say, hey, guess what? You know what? This is, not the percentage we all agreed upon. And therefore, whatever it is, like, we have to fix that. And so that's one of the ways that AI can really sort of keep it true and keep it honest in terms of going forward.
What does the intelligent family office of the future look like?
So it's really where you're never looking at a spreadsheet, frankly. It should be, as you know, where you can access an LLM by literally just talking to it. The future family office will literally just have that capability. And it's not that far away, where any question they have, anything they can do, is going to be done from their phone. And vice versa too. It's even going to get proactive where it's going to sit there and say to you, hey, guess what? You've got a cash flow crunch coming up in 3 months, or, it's hurricane season coming up. You better, this boat's not adequately insured, or, whatever else it might be. Or even what I just said, like, hey, we just did a search on your portfolio and it's not meeting up to the criteria that you put forward. And again, just the big word is easy, because if it's hard and difficult, it just doesn't work. Like the data doesn't go into the system, etc. And so that's where, again, as everyone knows, the more information you have, the easier it is to access it, and the more it's sort of put into a sort of readable human format, the better decisions you're going to be able to make. And so that's really where, you talk about the future and what's going to happen.
Ken, we're coming to the top of the show. This has been an incredible, it's just incredible what you're building. It's not just solving a problem, it's unlocking the hidden view of the global economy. For everybody out there, if you're thinking about AI, legacy, or the future of capital, this is a space you need to take a look at. The families are, and I get phone calls from other families myself where they're asking me about AI, right? AI or med tech companies, because they're interested in investing. That's another thing. They're not sure where to invest, right? They know they want to do it, but again, it's a lot about connections and network. So for all of you listening, if you're thinking about AI, legacy, or future capital, this is a place, as I said, you cannot afford to ignore. I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule, Ken, to join us. What are your closing thoughts, and how can people get a hold of you?
Well, number one, Gary, thank you so much for having me on, and I really appreciate not just this podcast, but all your podcasts. You definitely look at different subjects that are interesting and yet not well covered most of the time. And so thank you for that. But in terms of, how to get in touch with me, we're always looking to talk to different people. Certainly, as we understand more of the problem, we can tweak our product around that, even if they're not necessarily clients, but they can get us at, my email is ken@Veridel, Veridel.com, or Veridel.com. You can go and just click on the form or see a demo as far as what we do. But yeah.
Now, I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to join me today. And I appreciate all of you joining one more time. GSD presents Silicon Valley AI and Tech, Top Global Startups. My name is Gary Fowler, and I'm your host. Stay happy, stay safe, and stay healthy. And I'll be back again soon with another exciting edition. Ken, if you want to stay on for a few minutes,
Sure.
we'll talk.